Hello everyone, this week's Parsha is Parshat Bo. We're continuing the process of Geula, of redemption from Egypt. Last week we saw the seven Makot, or 7 of the plagues, and this week we carry on with the next 3 and more. And in this week's Parsha, if we were to look towards the end, we see that God issues a commandment, and it says as follows. We're in chapter 13, verse 3. Vayomer Moshe Elam Zachor et hayom hazeh. Right? Moses said to the people, remember this day, Asher yatzatem mimitzrayim mebeit avadim. Remember this day on which you departed from Egypt, from the house of bondage. Ki bechozek yad hotzi Hashem etchem mizeh velo ye'achel chametz. For with a strong hand Hashem removed you from here, and therefore chametz may not be eaten. Okay, so we look at this pasuk and we say, okay, so we can eat chametz. But we have a couple of questions that Rav Bernstein once asks. By the way, of course, this shir is based on Rav Bernstein, found in his shir last year, 2018, and he bases it on the Chasam Sofer. We'll get there in a minute. So, Rav Bernstein asks a couple of questions. First, what is this pasuk adding? What do we mean? If we were to look just a little bit earlier, in chapter 12, verse 15, we already see such a mitzvah. That is to say, it says, Kol ochel chametz v'nichrata hanefesh ahim Yisrael. So, for anyone who eats leavened food, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. Okay, don't eat chametz, pretty clear. And just a few seconds later, we see again in verse 19, Ki kol ochel machmetzet v'nichrata hanefesh ahim Israel. Right? For anyone who eats leavening, that soul shall be cut off from the assembly of Israel. It's quoted selectively from Sukkim. So we see that you're not allowed to eat chametz. So what is this later pasuk coming to teach us in 13:3? Not sure. And moreover, the pasuk seems to be building this connection between chozek yad and the prohibition against eating chametz. What does it say? It says, Ki bechozek yad hotzi Hashem etchem mizeh ve'lo ye'achel chametz. For with a strong hand Hashem removed you from here, and therefore chametz may not be eaten. What's the connection? What connection is there between these two things? Now, a person could answer simply, well, look, how is this connected? God was called reduced bechozek yad, with a strong hand. What was a strong hand? Well, smashing the Egyptians repeatedly and severely until the Egyptians became so sick of it that they told the Jewish people, look, get up and go. They effectively rushed the Jewish people out, and because the Jewish people were rushed out, they therefore didn't have time to let the dough rise. Because the dough didn't rise, therefore it didn't become chametz, and therefore they ate matzah. And as a commemoration to that, we don't eat chametz on Pesach, which is a reasonable explanation. But the Chasam Sofer, the Chasam Sofer, he offers a different explanation. He lived about 200 years ago. He was a Hungarian Rav, massive Talmid Chacham, and here's what he has to say. In order to answer these two questions, we need to dissect this. There's the chozek yad element and the velo yachel chametz element. So we'll deal with the latter first, the lo yachel chametz. So he quotes Rambam in the Sefer Zmanim, Hilchot Chametz Umatzah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Zayin, right, chapter 1, verse Halacha 7, and he says as follows. So Hochel min chametz atzma Pesach koshu harei ze asur min Torah. Right, person who eats chametz on Pesach, any amount whatsoever, that's asur min Torah. However, right, a person is not chayav karet for this. If it's just a kol shehu, he needs to eat a kazait in order to be chayav. Now, what's the deal here? And we'll get to the catch in a minute. But just some background information. So, what's Rambam teaching us? There's no real chiddush here so far, because we know that when a person fulfills a mitzvah or transgresses a mitzvah, there is a certain requisite amount that a person needs to eat or not eat or whatever in order to fulfill the mitzvah. For example, we're on Pesach, so let's talk about the mitzvah to eat matzah on the first night and the second night in Chutz La'aretz. So the mitzvah to eat matzah on the night of Pesach. How much does a person have to eat? Can he get away with anything? If he just eats a thimbleful, just the smallest fleck, is that enough? Answer is no. He needs to eat a kazait. However much that is, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. But the point is, there is a certain shiur, right, a certain requisite amount that a person needs to eat. They're required to eat that. If they don't eat that, even if they have some, that's not enough, and they haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. Okay. So now let's go on to a prohibition, because eating chametz on Pesach is not a positive mitzvah, it's a negative mitzvah. You cannot eat chametz on Pesach. Okay. So how much does a person need to eat? Now, normally, let's take a look at Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, you have a mitzvah to fast. We're not allowed to eat, we're prohibited. How much does a person have to eat in order to be chayav? That's the question. So, not surprisingly, there's a shear. Whatever it is, there's a certain requisite amount that a person has to eat or drink in order to be chayav for Yom Kippur, and the punishment is karet. He needs to bring a korban chatat. When does that obligation arise? After you've eaten the certain statutory requisite amount. Okay. What happens? And by the way, that's why people who do need to break their fast, if it's possible, post-game, the people who will, like rabbis who rule on Jewish law, will tell them to try to eat less than that shear within a certain amount of time, right? They'll say, look, every 10 minutes you can have slightly less than a shot of glass. I'm not paskening, I'm not giving you the law, but they'll say something, a specific amount, for you to avoid transgressing the biblical mitzvah. Okay, so why is this all relevant? Because eating on Yom Kippur is still forbidden. Even if you have less than that requisite amount, it's something called patur aval aser. Patur as in you're exempt from punishment, but it's still forbidden on a biblical level. So that's what Rambam seems to be telling us. Any amount, even the smallest, tiniest little bit of amount, it's aser min Torah. Okay, no chiddush here. But it's patur. Again, no chiddush. The problem arises by the fact that Rambam says, shene'emar lo ye'achel. Why is Rambam quoting a pasuk? Rambam does not need a pasuk. We know the halacha. So why does Rambam need to rely on this pasuk? That doesn't fit. That is the question. Fine. So that's the difficulty of this pasuk when we see v'lo yachal chametz. What does bechozek yad mean? Bechozek yad, says the Chasam Sofer, means as follows. When a person has merits, and a person is doing mitzvahs, etc., then God will help them. And truth is, that person, per se, right, we need to understand this idea very carefully, but the person is helping God help him. You know, when God sends mazel his way or starts giving him success, that's because of the person's own merit, because of a person's own merit, and therefore his merit allows him to succeed, and God has help in that way. What if a person has no merit, right? The person is completely devoid of anything to give merit? Then, if God helps him, then God is supposedly doing this all on his own. That is bechozek yad. Because God has to do everything through his own power and might, and he has no help from the person himself, that is bechozek yad. Okay, so now, that is bechozek yad, and that is v'lo yachel chametz. How do those two things work together? What was the status of the Jewish people in Mitzrayim? After all, we know there's a question, we discussed this earlier. Who was the first Jew? Was there a Jewish people before Matan Torah? So when it comes to, so really this is something that's based on merit. Avram Avinu, he merited, because he was at a certain level, he merited to have the status as a Jew. So too Yitzchak, his son, and so too Yaakov, the son of Yitzchak. All three of them had a certain amount of merit, and therefore they were able to be considered as Jews. The Jewish people in Mitzrayim did not have the requisite merit. They sunk to a level that was so low that they did not have the requisite merit, and therefore they were considered as Bnei Noach. They were considered as non-Jews, because they fell below a certain standard. Now, Bnei Noach also have certain mitzvahs. They have 7, and one of them is to avoid eating aver min achai, right? A limb torn from a live animal. That's a prohibition. Now, we need to ask, how does this work? How much does a Ben Noach need to eat in order to be chayav for this prohibition? So, fortunately, Rambam comes to tell us. We're in Hilchot Malachim, as in Sefer Shoftim, Peraktet Halacha Yud, that's in chapter 9, Halacha 10. Beken chayav al aver min achai. He's talking about a Ben Noach, a non-Jew. He's chayav for aver min achai. Fel basar min achai bekol shehu, with a kol shehu. Why? Shelo nitnu hashiurim ela l'Yisrael bilvad. Because shiurim were only given to Jews. Now, we need to understand this carefully, because if we're to look at this prohibition, the prohibition says velo yachel chametz. How much is that? Says Rambam, kol shehu. Hareze asur min Torah. You're not allowed to eat a kol shehu. But hang on a second. That seems to be indicating that they're Bnei Yisrael, right? They should be allowed to have a certain shear, and therefore a chametz should only be it should only be asur with a certain amount. And the fact that you're making them chayav for a kol shehu seems to indicate that they're a Ben Noach. Correct. That's exactly what's going on. And that is the link in this pasuk between what does that mean? Because the Jewish people back in Mitzrayim, they had no merit. They were completely devoid of any merit that would allow God to take them out of Egypt. God had to do it himself. That is the bechozek yad. Now, how do we show appreciation for that? How do we show recognition of that kindness that God did for us, even though we had zero merit of our own? Says the pasuk, velo yachel chametz, even a kol shehu. Why? Because back then you had the status of a ben noach, because you had no merit at all. You were not even considered Jewish people, and therefore you did not have shiurim back then. That is the word. Hopefully we were able to follow along. It's a geschmack word from the Chasam Sofer, and we'll see you next week.